Welcome to J Stern Designs. This is a redo for my FabFit Friday I do in my J Stern Designs Fitting and Pattern Perfection group on Facebook. I had a little snafu with the settings and capturing that video and recording it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of go through the whole procedure of doing a flat lock. I am actually working on kits. I'm going to be teaching at Stitches United in Atlanta at the end of the month, in the beginning of June, and I'm teaching a basic serger class. So one of the techniques I'm going to be teaching is the flat lock stitch. So I thought what I would do, since I have my serger out and I'm working on the kits and I'm sewing samples anyway, I thought I would just share or reshare the flat lock and how to get a great result on the Baby Lock Ovation serger. Now, if you don't have a Baby Lock, don't worry, because I'll tell you what the settings should be if you have a manual tension setting, a serger that has manual tension settings. So let me just switch the view to my serger, and it's not threaded because I thought I would just show you everything from the get-go. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to set our serger up for a 3-thread stitch, but we're going to have tension settings that will make it a flat lock. So let me thread the machine. I'll explain what I'm doing. I'll explain how to set it up for the Baby Lock. We'll stitch a sample and then I'll explain what makes it a flat lock stitch. So let's do it in that order since I haven't threaded yet. So I'm going to be using the both upper and lower loopers, and I'm going to be using the left needle. So basically I'm doing a wide cover, I'm doing a wide 3-thread. You can also do this stitch with a narrow 3-thread, but I like the wide because it just gives me a wider, a wider grab onto the fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to thread. Now, to thread, unlike a regular 3-thread, instead of putting the needle thread through the needle thread path, we're actually going to put the needle thread in the same path as the upper looper. And the reason why we're going to do that is because the upper looper and the needle thread need to be relatively less tense than the lower looper. So I'm going to start with my needle thread, and I'm actually just going to click that right into where I would normally thread the upper looper, and I'm just going to get it over here. I'm just going to thread that. Oops. All right, and I'm using a blue for that. I'm going to use a dark green color for my upper looper, and I'm going to click it into the same thread path. Okay, instead of going over towards the needle, I'm going to go straight down like this, and then I'm going to get my lower looper, and I'm just going to thread that in its traditional lower looper tension unit. You'll notice I have the presser foot up. When the presser foot is up, the tension discs are open, and that allows for the thread to seat properly in between the tension discs. So that's important. Make sure your presser foot is up. Okay, so now I'm going to use the well, before we actually feed it through using the air feed on the Baby Lock, let me explain the other settings that we're going to have. The upper looper is obviously going to be up and it's engaged to use. I have my knife up, and that's because I'm going to be serging on the edge of the fabric. If you want to do this flat lock technique in the middle of your fabric to maybe create some decorative stitching within your garment, you could put the knife down so you don't catch the fold in the fabric when you're doing it, within the fabric. But for now, I'm going to leave it up. My cutting setting is at 7.5, so I'm going to have the widest cutting setting. And my stitch length is between 2 and 3. Wave overlock is set on overlock, and my stitch selector is set on D. Now, D on the Baby Lock Ovation Serger translates to tight tension in the lower looper. You also use the D setting to do a stitch like a another unbalanced stitch like a rolled hem. And so what it does is it actually rolls the fabric under, and the lower looper pulls the fabric around to get a roll on the edge. So we are also going to be using the D setting for the flat lock, because what creates the flat lock is a tight lower looper. So my settings are correct. I'm going to engage the threading. I'm going to turn my hand wheel towards me to lock, get everything locked in place so the air tubes are connected. Hear that click? All right, so then I'm just going to start with the lower looper, and I'm going to thread that. All right, so I've got that one threaded, and now I'm going to thread my my upper looper. Okay, there we go. All right, I've got them both threaded, and I'm just going to put my threads to the back like that. Then what I'm going to do is thread my needle. I can put my presser foot down at this point, and I can disengage my threading so I can move if I need to get the thread in the needle. Putting the presser foot down at this point after you've threaded gives you more room to get the thread through the eye of the needle. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch a sample. You can see this looks like a 3-thread wide on the top. The upper looper threads look very similar to a 3-thread. However, when we turn it over, instead of seeing the lower looper, what we see is the needle thread. Okay, and that's the difference in tension settings. Okay, because remember, because we threaded the needle thread through the upper looper thread guide, both of those are less snug, and then the lower looper is tighter. So to create the flat lock now, what you do is you open it and you pull it. And what I'm showing you first is the underside. You can see those little ladders. This is also known as a reverse flat lock. So let me just turn it to the right side now and pull it this way so you can see. Basically what happens is it slides down flat. Okay. And depending on your fabric now, we can see, I think you can see, the fabric is a little bit smushed in there. I had the knife set to cut the maximum amount of fabric to make it as wide as I could at 7 or 7.5. Okay, so lowering it to 6.5, I want to say it's still a little bit too wide. So I'm going to lower it all the way down. Okay, so let's pull this flat. Okay, so I have less fabric in there because my cutting width and the knife is as close to the needle as we can get, but you can see that it's still not snapped down super tight. Okay, I can lift that up really easily. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a way to tighten your tension. All right, so you can see I've got my 3 threads, and they're positioned right underneath the thread guide on the antenna. So I'm going to take my lower looper thread, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop it around so it's actually looped around once. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a little bit more tension on the thread, and it's going to snap down that flat lock a little bit tighter. Now the thing about this is this isn't really a Baby Lock sanctioned way to fix your tension, but it works really well. The one thing you have to be careful of is that you're watching your thread out of the corner of your eye, and you're making sure it's spooling properly from the spool, okay? Because it could get caught, or you just want to make sure that it's freely moving into the tension unit, because now you've wrapped it around twice. If it starts to get too tight, or if you can see that it's pulling on the antenna, then that's not in a good position. So just keep an eye on that. start again, and let's see how this looks. And I'm watching this as I serge. All right, so let's pull this open and see if it lays flatter. Okay, so you can see this is giving me a tighter, see, I can't pick it up as easily as I could the first time. You could actually do another thing where, another way you can make it tighter is if you move, if I had threaded this, or if I had my back spool stand, I've sort of threaded myself into a corner because this is way on the end here. But if I had swung my spools over one and used one guide over, I could have actually taken this thread and then I could bring it from this thread guide across the back to the next one over, you know, and I could have gone in that direction. And the fact that the thread has to come up here, go across, wrap around, and go back down would give it a little bit more tension. So think about how you're positioning your spools. But again, remember, you want to be careful that you don't create a situation where it's not spooling off properly and it creates a lot of tension on here, because it can cause your machine to have a problem, or you can crack your antenna, which I did do not paying attention. And I actually wasn't even trying to create more tension. I was on a standard setting, and I didn't notice that my thread got caught under my spool and I snapped my antenna. So you need to be careful with that. But in any case, so let me just show you this last one, because this will add just a little bit more tension. All right, so you can see that it's a little bit more tense because I had to sort of pull it to get it to be straight, sort of smooth it out. So give yourself an extra tail on the end if you're increasing your tension. But you'll notice on this one, it lays really nice and flat. So that's giving me a really nice result. That's what I wanted to share, and I actually you know, I had my everything set up and I did it as my FabFit Friday, and I had the disaster where I couldn't save it and then re-upload it to YouTube. So I decided I would just come on and do it again today so that people could see it. If you have any questions about how to do a flat lock, please post your comments below. If you'd like to join us at J Stern Designs Fitting and Pattern Perfection Facebook group, I'll put a link in the comments below so you can join that. You know, because I do live at 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time every Friday. So that's like 10 o'clock in California, and it's 1 o'clock in Connecticut where I am. So if you'd like to join me for that, you know, click the link below and join my group. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, and I will see you next week, hopefully for a repost of FabFit Friday.